future candidates?
No, no, they're here for the youth proclamation,
Oh, great.
Youth and Care proclamation.
I was hopeful that we had future candidates that were here. I'll mention that anyways.
Unfortunately not yet.
Good evening and welcome. It looks like we got lots of volume, maybe a little bit too much volume. We want to make sure that people on the far side of the wall can hear because that's where the speakers drop down and not too much echo on this side. So, Mr. Pattison, can you hear us? Good. Okay, that's sounding okay on this side now too. Thanks. I'd like to call our regular meeting of council for Wednesday, May 16th, 2018 to order, and it's just 7:01 p.m. by the digital clocks and 6:58 by the analog, but we go by digital here when we can. And the first item is always the adoption of the agenda, and we have an agenda that was circulated, a motion to adopt as circulated. Thank you, Councillor Seegers, Councillor Inkster, and there are some amendments. We'll move to the corporate officer to take us through some misprints on the front page.
Thank you, Your Worship. They're minor, no changes to the actual agenda, but if you look at the heading under item 7, that should be deleted. It is not adoption of minutes. And 8, commission minutes should replace the header on 7. And then, of course, the word none removed. And then on the next page, it's just numbering. On page 2 of the order paper, the heading bylaws is numbered number 9, and it should actually be 8. And then the remaining sections below should be renumbered to 9, 10, and 11. I can say also that this was brought to my attention very late this afternoon. We have amended the version that has been published on our webpage. I just felt it was too late to distribute a new agenda for council.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. And we'll try and make sure we get the right numbers as we go through. So just to repeat, item 7 is actually commission minutes and reports. And item 8 is bylaws. And then new business is 9, business items are 10, et cetera, as we go through. Any other amendments to the order paper or to the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried, so we have an amended agenda. We have no appointments and delegations tonight, but we do have a proclamation, which I'm pleased to present for Child and Youth in Care Week, June 4th to the 9th. And I'll read the entire proclamation, if that's okay. Whereas we are acknowledging our province's amazing, diverse, resilient children and youth living in foster care, and whereas Youth in and From Care advocated for this week, now in its 8th year, so their brothers and sisters in care could grow up feeling celebrated for their diverse talents and accomplishments, surrounded by a supportive community who stands with them, and whereas they also wanted to raise awareness about the barriers they face and fight the stigma that comes with being a foster kid. In celebrating this week, we hope British Columbians have key information and tools to celebrate and support our incredible young people every other week of the year too. Now therefore, I, Bruce Milne, do hereby proclaim that June 4th to the 10th, 2018 shall be known as Child and Youth in Care Week in the District of Sechelt. And we really do send out our celebratory support to all of those young people, but especially young people who are in provincial care and need additional support. They are an amazing and diverse group of people. Moving on then to our next item, which is the adoption of the minutes of our previous council meeting. Yes, I think we had some people representing Youth in Care here tonight. That's great, and thank you for coming. And when I walked in and saw a row of younger people in the room. I thought maybe they're here because they're watching council. They'd like to participate as future candidates and council members, because we could really use some diversity around the table, as you can see, in terms of age, and a little help on the gender as well. So if you really want to participate, talk to any one of us about what it would be like to be a young person on this council, and you'll get encouragement. Thank you for coming out. Adoption of the minutes of the previous council meeting, which is item 5.1. Motion to receive and adopt. Thank you, Councillor Seegers and Councillor Lutz. First, I'll ask if there's any errors or omissions in those minutes. And if not, I'll look for all those in favor of adoption. And that's carried. And is there any business arising from the minutes of May 2nd? Okay, we'll move on then to item 7, which is committee, commissioner minutes and reports. And we have the minutes of the Finance, Culture and Economic Development Committee of Wednesday, May 9th. Motion to receive. Thank you, Councillor Seegers and Councillor Inkster. Any errors or omissions or any of those recommendations people would like to pull out for special attention? If there's no errors or omissions, we'll move directly to a motion to receive and adopt recommendations 2, 3, and 4. Thank you, Councillor Lutz, Councillor Mueller. All those in favor? That's carried, and that's moved forward. Now we move to the renumbered bylaws, which is on page 2 of our order paper. And we have for third reading a report, and for third reading on the District of Sechelt elections, another voting. First, a motion to receive the report. Thank you, Councillor Seegers, for moving, and seconded is by Councillor Lutz. All those in favor? And we'll turn to the corporate officer for a brief introduction.
Thank you, Your Worship. As part of our getting ready for the 2018 general elections, which will be held on the voting day will be October 20th, staff have identified the need for council to consider amending its District of Sechelt elections and other voting bylaw number 504/2011. The first, as I've set out here in the staff report, the first amendment that we're asking council to consider relates to public access to candidates' nomination and endorsement documents. As I set out there, the legislation requires that those documents be readily available during business hours after the nomination period closes, up until 30 days after the election is declared. The results of the election is declared. The Act also allows the local government to provide public access in other ways, most commonly by posting the documents on our webpage. And the legislation says if you're going to do that, it must be done by bylaw. So that's the first suggested amendment. The second one has to do with advanced voting opportunities. The legislation says that there must be 2 at minimum advanced voting opportunities, and the first must be on the 10th day before the election, and the second one is a date that can be established by council by bylaw. With the election being moved from November to October, we have a conflict in Sechelt because the Arts Festival is utilizing Seaside Centre for the whole month, pretty much, of October, and that's where we've usually had advanced voting. So staff are suggesting moving the advanced voting opportunity to this space here, but it does create some conflicts with scheduling conflict with the council meeting and the finance committee meeting in October. So to solve all of that, staff is suggesting that that the voting bylaw be amended so that the second advanced voting opportunity is the 4th day before the general election on the Tuesday, so that it doesn't conflict with the council meeting that is that Wednesday, and also recommending that the finance committee meeting be rescheduled. The third section of amendments are really just housekeeping items. The Local Government Act was renumbered a couple of years ago when the province did a statute revision, and so there's a number of sections in the current bylaw that are identified incorrectly, and so staff's just gone through and corrected those. Attached to my report is a copy of voting bylaw number 504-2011 for council's reference, and should you see anything else there that you would like amended.
Thank you very much for that. Any questions of the issues we're to look at? Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. On page 25, number 1, it talks about the public access to nomination and endorsement documents, as you mentioned, and that they're available to the public in the offices for that time period. But then below, at the bottom paragraph, you say that if we put them online, information would be redacted. Do we redact the information that's actually available in hard copy?
Yes, we have. We've basically, in the past, just made copies of the originals and have them ready to email out, or people come to look at them or what have you, so we do redact them, yes.
Thank you.
And on that point, just for clarification, the nomination documents, I understand, are endorsement documents party endorsements? Is that what an endorsement document is?
It's the wording that, it's because the endorsement is part of the paper where your two nominators sign. And also in the, so basically it's just the wording that's used under the legislation.
Okay. And I'm hoping that the October Finance, Culture and Economic Development Committee 1 week before the election won't be too heavy, that we won't be doing very much business that day, a week before the polls. Change the tax rates. Any other questions of the report? And if not, I'll look for somebody to move the second and third recommendations we have. Thank you, Councillor Wright and Councillor Mueller. And those recommendations, 1, that council will give first, second, and third reading to the elections and other voting amendment bylaw, and that October 10th, 2018 Finance, Culture and Economic Development Committee meeting be rescheduled to October 9th, 2018. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And now let's move directly to that bylaw, which is 8.1b on page 2. And actually 8.1b is the amendment bylaw. Has had no readings. Can we introduce it for a first time today? Thank you, Councillor Seegers and Councillor Lutz. Introducing bylaw number 504-1-2018, a bylaw to amend certain procedures for the conduct of local government elections and other voting. All those in favor of first reading? That's carried. And second reading is brought forward by Councillor Wright and then seconded by Councillor Seegers. And discussion at second reading. I'd like to point out that in the main bylaw, page 29 of our agenda package, page 2 of the 2010 bylaw, special voting opportunities, item 4, St. Mary's Hospital has had a change of names, and it should be Seashalt Hospital. That's under item 4 of the original bylaw number 504. So I think we should add that to bylaw number 504-1-2018, a bylaw to amend certain procedures for the conduct, that at this time we also amend the name of the hospital. And that's an amendment, so I'd look for somebody to move that. Thank you, Councillor Seegers and Councillor Lutz. All those in favor of the amendment? And then second reading of the amendment bylaw. Any further discussion of that? All those in favor? That's carried. And third reading is moved today by Councillor Seegers and Councillor Lutz. All those in favor of third reading? That's carried. And it'll come back in 2 weeks for
Yes,
adoption.
it will.
Which reminds, I'll see our young candidates have already left, so I can't remind them to think about the fact that their election is, I think, only 5 months away. I didn't count recently, but it's less than 6. So certainly people should be making some preliminary arrangements, at least to what they're going to do on October 20th. For second, third reading and adoption, we have the official community plan amendment, and first a report to be received from the community planner. Thank you, Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz, all those in favor. And we'll turn to Mr. Thompson to speak to the report.
Thank you, Your Worship. Here a brief presentation following the public hearing for the official community plan amendment for the spectrum of care. Kind of one of the first changes we've made, we have actually changed all the references from spectrum of care to continuum of care, which better reflects a lot of the provincial language. So that is one of the small changes, but quite noticeable right up front. So I kind of briefly wanted to go through some of the issues raised at the public hearing and some of the comments we received elsewhere as well, and then how we kind of look at the plan to address those. So kind of one of the issues that was brought up was that there was some excluded areas in the that wouldn't be able to support some of the larger scale facilities. And a lot of that has to do simply with the fact that the infrastructure isn't in place to support these. Primarily, say in the Sandy Hook, East Porpoise Bay, and Tuanak neighborhoods, without sewer, some of the larger scale facilities and just any kind of higher density development just wouldn't be feasible. Small scale facilities are possible in those areas, and that would just be kind of dependent on on-site, say septic studies or something along those lines that would be able to ensure that those would have capacity, but those would be possible still. Then there was some discussion about definitions, and definitions is kind of come up almost at every stage, and how much definitions we put in the official community plan, what do we exclude in terms of our definitions. So with this amendment, staff have purposely not included a lot of definitions, because a lot of those are very use specific and belong more appropriately in the zoning bylaw. As you kind of get later into the amendment with the implementation, we are going to be putting those into the zoning bylaw, particularly with focus in the bylaw 530. So that's where a lot of those definitions will go, and still keeping them quite simple in the OCP. Then kind of one of the last main issues that was raised was the availability of appropriately designated lands, and how most of that that land that is designated for some of the higher density developments are in the downtown. This is a lot of it has to do with, of course, our growth strategy, and looking at the availability of these designated lands was kind of outside the scope of this amendment. It would be more appropriate at a kind of larger scale OCP amendment that could look at, say, if there were other nodes or corridors that could also support something like these facilities, but that was just outside the scope of this amendment. Based off some of the comments, we have made some alterations to the amendment, and the bylaw as altered is attached to the agenda. The intent remains the same. As I already said, the title has been changed to reflect the provincial terminology from spectrum of care to continuum of care. The sections under 5.13 have been simplified from 9 policies to 4, and trying to just, instead of kind of breaking those different facilities up, kind of just combine a lot of those policies into just 4 policies rather than 9. We also add some new policies to Part 410, social well-being of the OCP, to look at some of those other care options. And then we also made a bit more specific about our implementation policies. So I'll just kind of go through some of the policy changes. It's going to be a little bit cut off. So just in general, this is kind of the intent statement. It largely remains the same. It kind of just got combined with some of the other policies, that they should respect the neighborhood form and character and provide appropriate access and amenities. Then we kind of looked at just essentially saying that they could be accommodated in all designations and zones that accommodate multi-unit development and mixed-use development. And then that we will be looking kind of a little bit of an implementation strategy in the zoning bylaw to actually properly calculate and make the proper uses for these different uses, the different regulations for these uses. Excuse me. Then with this policy, we're looking really at institutional facilities and where those other high density uses can be more appropriate. So that's really looking more at those kind of core areas or nodal areas where you'd see the higher density residential, those bigger commercial uses and other institutional uses. And these ones really need to be well serviced by transit, medical facilities, and recreational opportunities. And then this is kind of a clause that gives council some flexibility when considering official community plan, considering these facilities. And that's saying that if something isn't contemplated by the official community plan, council can still consider it as long as it shows that it does fill a need and does follow, say, best practices and newest technologies or so on and so forth. Then kind of getting into the Part 10 policies. So these, so the first one here on the page 10.21 is really just looking at those community services and the range of care facilities. And those are kind of supported throughout the district where they are accessible and appropriate. 10.6.1, this is just essentially saying that to support a range of care facilities for any people, for those requiring social support programs and amenities to enable them to age in place. This 10.121 is really looking at just encouraging developers and people bringing applications to include these kind of care facilities or places for people age in place within their proposals, so that we can develop complete communities for, say, larger scale developments. And then 10.12.2 is really looking at just kind of further supporting care options for seniors through the zoning bylaw. And that's looking at those small scale home-based personal services to the large scale ones, and where those are supported in the residential designations. And then, yeah, just the kind of update on the implementation. It was just really adding some more detail to this, and that's addressing the community care needs through new use definitions, the specific use regulations, the siting requirements, and regulations pertaining to height, density, and massing for care facilities. And then finally, getting to the recommendations. The first one is that council confirms that the consultation has been early ongoing and is now concluded. Then there are three recommendations that then there are recommendations for council to give its second reading as altered, and that then continue with third reading and finally adoption. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the planner while we're here, or of the report? Councillor Seegers?
Thank you. One of the concerns that I've had all along with looking at this whole policy, the way it's come forward to this bylaw, is focusing on institutional, civic, and utilities designation. Basically, bottom line is, where can we put these given our current zoning? So when I went through the report here, it did address all of the concerns I had. So neighborhood centers, multi-unit development, and mixed-use development. Where do those exist in Sechelt? And then on page 41, where it says availability of land, it indicates that the OCP and zoning bylaw should be reviewed to determine whether or not there's sufficient land with the appropriate land use designation or zones to support the growth. And you are expected to start the review of the OCP in 2019. So if that wasn't in here, I probably would not have supported moving this forward at this time. But seeing that you're actually looking at doing that work so that we'll have the land identified, because I don't want to see a senior center on downtown Cowrie, which is downtown center, which is one of the designated areas for this type of facility. I could just see us wanting to create a vibrant downtown, put in some kind of nightclub with residential and across the street from a senior center. I don't think that would work. As I mentioned, Director of Planning, I come from a very extensive, my extended family is very large. My mom came from a family of 12, my dad from a family of 8. So if you think about all the uncles and aunts and cousins and stuff that I have, and my parents were some of the younger ones. I also had a brother-in-law who recently passed away from MS, who was in a home for 20 years. So I've had a lot of interaction with various care facilities. And they don't all need to be right in the heart of a city, right in the heart of downtown. We need to be able to have these facilities in places that address the care that's given and the type of interaction the people in those care facilities want to or need to have with the community. So just this little paragraph at the bottom of page 41 gives me some comfort that we're going to actually be able to implement this in a way that will work for the people who will be residing in these facilities. So thank you for putting that in.
Any other comments or clarifications for the planner before we move on? Councillor Mueller.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to provide some comment on this. I think the updates after the public hearing were very helpful, and they really, I think, got to the root of what's needed. I think specifically the intent statements that were added will really get to what will become a workable version. And I'm aware that some of the issues raised by Councillor Seagos, they do exist, but in terms of the policy, at some point the market and the business is going to take over and deal with some of those. But with the policy, I think we're headed in the right direction. However, I did want to say that, you know, this has been somewhat of a general exercise, and for council and the community, we got to look at this as a prelude to the OCP update. We're going to deal with a lot of these issues again, but community-wide and in greater depth. So I was happy how this turned out, and I think when we go through the next pieces, we'll get some of the rest of those in better shape. But as an exercise, you know, dealing with the OCP in its entirety is a huge project, and I'm happy we had this one under our belt and just to kind of deal with some of the moving parts, and I learned a lot. So, thank you.
Thank you for those comments. And Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, I don't, I know what has been mentioned the last couple of times to not restrict particular parts of Sechelt to the provision of these care facilities, but what we also should keep in mind as we move forward, and I'm assuming planning staff keeps in mind, is that we probably have to have care facilities with multiple, we probably have to have multiple care facilities with multiple access points and multiple road network connectivity because of the need for services and emergency services for those larger facilities. So we need to keep that in mind, i.e. don't, in a sense, put care facilities at the end of a single lengthy road. And that's probably another reason why we should be looking at the areas that we've had proposed, and that a review may come up with those same sorts of concerns and or rules to be put in place when we put, you know, 50 to 120 people in a large building, not necessarily in the downtown core. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for all those comments and questions. I don't hear any more for the planner, so thank you very much for the report and the work you did after the public hearing and during the public hearing as well. So looking at the recommendations, let's begin with recommendation 2, that council confirms that consultation with persons, organizations, and authorities has been early ongoing and is now considered concluded for official community plan amendment bylaw number 492-21-2018. Councillor Lutz first, seconded by Councillor Seegers. Any discussion of that? We've all had the report, and we've got the written public hearing minutes with us as well. All those in favor, just thank you. And recommendation that official community plan amendment bylaw number 492-21-2018, continuum of care, is altered as attached to this report. Councillor Wright and Councillor Seegers seconding. All those in favor? That's carried. And we will, recommendation that we now move to second, third reading and adoption of official community plan amendment bylaw number 492-21-2018 as altered. Councillor Wright again and Councillor Seegers seconding. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's good. We'll move then to the bylaw, which was page 57 of our agenda package, item 8.2B. It's a bylaw number 49221-2018, Continuum of Care, a bylaw to amend District of Sechelt Official Community Plan bylaw number 492-2010 to adopt policies that create opportunities for continuum of care options within the community. Second reading after the public hearing is brought forward today by Councillor Seegers and Councillor Lutz. All those, any discussion at second reading? All those in favor? Don't want to go too fast. Third reading is moved by Councillor Mueller and Councillor Wright. All those in favor of third reading? And adoption today is moved by Councillor Wright and Councillor Lutz. All those in favor of adoption? That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you for the work. And I just want to acknowledge that Sue Jackal is in the gallery tonight too, and she's been watching over this particular part of our policy for at least a decade, but we're getting closer. When we get the zoning bylaw, then we'll have it all in place. Yeah. Aaron's done a lot of good work on this. Thanks. That takes us from 8 down to what is 9, new business, there being none, 10, which is business items being none, to item 11, and we actually have the right sub-numbering on this, councillors' reports, and I'll begin, if I can, on my left and the gallery's right with Councillor Wright.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Attended a number of closed council meetings over the last couple of weeks. Finance Committee, also went to the Davis Bay Community Association. We were well represented there. There was 3 councillors there that evening. Also went to the roundtable for the UN Sustainability Development Goals. I was only able to stay for a portion of that meeting, but it was a very interesting meeting, and some of the goals that they are hoping to achieve. The magnitude of those goals is vast, is the only thing I can say. And then last but not least, I attended the meeting with the executive of the East Porpoise Bay Community Association and had the pleasure of their company for about 2.5 hours. And it was a good time. I enjoyed it. And that concludes my report for District of Sechelt.
Thank you for that report. And Councillor Seegers?
Thank you. It's been a very light couple of weeks for me. I mean, besides the regular meetings. Canada Day meeting. It turns out I'm going to be the parade marshal, actually doing the, making sure all the floats go where they need to go to. I guess I was the runner-up parade marshal or the whatever last year, and so I get to do the job this year. So it'll be an interesting time. I'm going to rope my granddaughter into helping. And then just before this meeting, I joined the chamber for their meetup at Northern Divine. Great turnout for the tour. If you haven't toured the facility up there, it's phenomenal what they're doing with the sturgeon. So that's my report. Thanks.
Thank you for that report and look forward to your activities on Canada Day. Indeed. And Councillor Mueller.
Yes, thank you. I guess I wanted to start my report by saying, I was really regret that I couldn't be here at the last regular council meeting. I know that was a really big meeting. I was injured a few weeks ago, and my knee has had this problem of swelling up badly, and so I pushed it too much in the day, and I was not able to make that meeting. But I know it was really important for the community, so I just wanted to make mention of that. Other than that, due to my injury, I've been off work, so I've been able to really focus on council stuff, which has been good. And I'll just run through a bunch of things that we've been able to do in that time while I was recuperating. Been working a lot on Oceans Day, helping organize that one. That's taken up a fair amount of my time. It's been fun, though. I got out to speak to the Davis Bay Community Association this past week, just to present the ideas. And then I also, we had an organizing meeting that was attended by the Sechelt Nation and the Sechelt Downtown Business Association. It was good, and a few other volunteers potentially. It's great. It's shaping up good. We've added a volleyball tournament to this year, so hopefully we're going to have a few of a different crowd there, a bit of a different draw. But it's great to make use of that court that we have. It's just fantastic at Friendship Park. I attended the UN Roundtable with a few other councillors. I had to leave early. I had a quick brief meeting with the mayor. I also had a meeting with the advisory planning chair, Michael Houle, just to get that connection a little stronger with my role as the planning chair. And then I also attended the reconciliation evening that was a few weeks back, which I think was a very important evening for anyone who was there. So start to pay attention to what's going on with that movement, because it is something that could have a huge impact on Sechelt future. And I think that yeah, we've really got to pay attention to that. It's one of the most important things happening in our community right now, and it just can't be overstated how important that is. There's a bunch of other little things too, but I think I'll conclude my report with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report, and it'd be interesting when you're talking to future candidates and tell them that it's a time when you're sick and off work that you can actually really devote to council. The balancing is different because there's so much going on all the time, but we appreciate the work you do. Councillor Lutz.
Thank you. I too attended our Finance Committee meeting and some in camera, also SCRD as an observer, and attended the Davis Bay Community Association and heard our Councillor Mueller discuss Ocean Stay, and he was very well received by the group. I think they will get involved. I also attended the round table where the 17 Sustainable Development Goals came forward. And boy, they really hit home. We are fortunate, a couple of the organizers for the BC group live here on the coast, and they have been touring the province with the same kind of a round table as I was present at. And they've been very well received. And I have asked that the goals and a resolution be sent to me so I can present it to council. And we can look at how we can be part of this movement. We've only got till 2030 to reach all 17 goals. So time is speeding up, and they're all important. So I was pleased to attend, and yet another thing to take on, but it so involves all of us that you can't turn your back on it. So thank you.
Thank you for that report. And Councillor Inkster, anything to report?
Just wanted to mention a few things. One thing I forgot to mention last time, and I just, with a little bit extra time this time, I just wanted to talk about the good McHappy Day that a number of people did mention from council that made. I think 2 other council members were there. And I just wanted to mention I was there for a couple, 2-3 hours last time, and just how good of an event it is, and how the money raised goes to, I believe, directly, mostly to the Hospital for Sick Children, which if you've had children in there, and I've known a few people that have, and or you have children, you see the value of that building. So I reply very quickly when they ask me to go to that. I wanted to mention another couple of things. The sustainability goals session that we had a few nights ago was, and it is true that there's people that are involved live close to where they're working out of from Vancouver, and that's good to see because they're so quick to bring the goals home to discuss. And as Councillor Lutz did mention, there were 17 goals, and I'm not sure if Councillor Lutz mentioned this, but I view them as sustainability goals, a number of them, but also societal goals, which is a number of the goals. And I kind of, just based on what we talked about and what our council members that were able to make it till the end of the evening talked about, is that Councillor Lutz sort of talked about societal ones, and I sort of talked about the sustainability ones. So we were kind of the good 1-2 punch on those issues that were being presented to us. Of course, our interests overlap, but I think that's important when you have 2 of us there, that you focus strong on those issues that are important to make sure that that your council represents the 17 issues well. I also wanted to mention that I went down to the other day when the weather was nice to the park, walked the promenade there and went along the park and went down to our new dock that's in. And I just wanted to let council know, if they don't know, that the dock was really well used by probably adults and children alike, probably by 50 to, looks like over 50 children were down there using our dock for various things. And I wanted to talk to staff about couple of things I noticed after the meeting, but it's just very well used, that dock there. So, we'll see how it doesn't move this time, but just standing on it, if anybody hasn't gone and stand on it, it's a very solid dock, but it was good to see how well used it was by the community. Like I said, young and old alike, and the promenade, and all the people on the promenade. And I was just taking a look at some of our infrastructure after a few months, just to see how it looks in the summer, and it just definitely a seaside community. As I end, I wanted to mention, I was wondering about the regional district, if the 4 directors that are not returning would be willing to change their position on water, because the 4 of them have now declared over the last number of weeks that they're not returning, so maybe they'll change their position on water, just a hope. But I also wanted to mention, as I end, that as I came in today, my son said to me, he's looked at me and he said, "Make good decisions for Sechelt tonight, Dad." So it shows that when you're born here and live here, that Sechelt is very much in your DNA. So thank you.
That's good counsel. We should have children tell us every day when we walk.
Pardon me?
We should have children every day to remind us to make good decisions.
Yeah.
For Sechelt. Thank you for that report. And I can move on to the Regional District Board reports and ask Councillor Wright, our Regional Director at the board, if he has anything to report from the RD.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. Attended the Agenda Planning Committee for Infrastructure, which is tomorrow. There was also a Planning and Development Committee meeting. There was a number of reports on that. Everything from BC timber sales operations to arena upgrades, trails on Gambier Island, some rural area zoning amendments, some development variances, and minutes of the various meetings. And I also attended a board meeting at the SCRD. Basically what they approved was the minutes of the Corporate and Admin Services Committee. And then there was a bylaw looking at the fees for the cemetery. And that bylaw was read and it was amended accordingly. And that concludes my SCRD report.
Thank you for that. And I wouldn't add anything to the SCRD report except to say tomorrow is an infrastructure committee meeting, so there'll be more discussion of water and water supply over a period of time. So that would move us to item 12, which is first 12.1 is council correspondence, motion to receive. Thank you, Councillor Seegers. Councillor Mueller seconding. All those in favor? Are there any of those correspondence that we'd actually like to discuss? I noticed the first one segs from Councillor Inkster's comment about the Trail Bay Wharf and how solid that is. And of course, that's the reason the Davis Bay community keeps writing letters about the swim float. And we're in the process of writing a longer letter back to them to explain why it's not on our budget right now. And that'll come from my office. Any others that people would like to bring out? Seeing none, we'll go then to 12.2, which is the RCMP March monthly statistics motion to receive. Thank you, Councillor Lutz and Councillor Seegers. All those in favor of receipt? Any discussion of those items? They're within the norms. And Sechelt Visitor Center statistics motion to receive. Councillor Seegers moving and Councillor Lutz second. All in favor of receipt? And any discussion of those minutes? Again, they're just creeping up again. It's April, so they're coming back to April 2017 numbers. And seeing no other business, I would look for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Councillor Seegers, moving for the third time today. A motion to adjourn and seconded. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. It's 7:45. Any comments from those that are here? I see Ms. Jackal first. Yes. I think it was a bit of a learning for us all too, to do it slower, and as you say, unpack it a bit and then walk through as opposed to what we had before.